to our center. I hope you'll come by and see us. You know, we're just up the road a ways. We're open Monday through Saturday, 9 to 4:30 last entry, and we close at 5. So, oh, that's right. Yeah, I'm still on the summer schedule. We're Monday through Friday right now. So if you have guests here through Christmas, come on by and see us. We'll be having some free classes as always. And if you have questions, Chris has come to us today. We're so glad because he's our biologist and does these coyote programs. Marissa and I were going to give it to you today, and we've been calling him to make sure we were getting all our facts correct. So we're really happy he came with us. We're going to go over, of course, his PowerPoint program. Chris is then going to take you through our website, which is a really great means to access information yourself. Chris will have to go back home to Tyner. Yeah. But anytime you have questions, call us at the center. We're happy to try to answer your questions. If we can't answer them, we'll try to find the answer for you and come back to it. Marissa, of course, is always doing the surveys and studies now. So if you're interested, come be a citizen scientist volunteer. It's pretty fun. It gets you outside. You see a lot of things. Some things you might not want to see, but some things you do. But it is a lot of fun. And like I say, if you ever want to have a history session or the natural world here, we're happy to come and give you a lecture on that one. I was telling Chris, I've got a great program on the history of the Currituck Club and all the hunt clubs here in Currituck. It'd be a lot of fun. I'd love to come and show it to you. Like I say, Marissa's doing these surveys all the time, and it's really fun. It gets you outside. You know, that's our motto there to go outside. It's good for you. It's good for your health. It's good for your mental health. Good for your eyesight. And for God's sake, let's push all the children outside too. So, listen, Marissa's going to run the program while Chris talks to you, and then afterwards, if you have any questions of the three of us, feel free. You're up, buddy.
All right. Volume. You might be able to hear. Can you hear me all right without the mic?
Yes.
If you can, I'll just hold on to the mic for security.
Yeah.
I usually like to stand behind something because I like to hang on to things, but I'm going to hang on to a mic. But anyway, my name is Chris Turner. I'm a district biologist with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. The state of North Carolina is broken down into 9 districts. We are in District 1. That includes 13 northeastern counties. So I tell people I work everything from the Virginia line down to Ocracoke, which includes most of the Outer Banks, as well as far west as Martin County, Bertie County, Hertford County, kind of the western edge. So I've got a lot of diversity in this district. And I tell people I work the best district in the state. And I really believe that's true because if you enjoy hunting or fishing or you enjoy the outdoors, period, I can't think of a better place to be because of the resources that we have and what else is there but water, right? I mean, that plays a huge role in what the appreciation that we have for this corner of the state. So, anyway, I'm very fortunate to work here, and I appreciate being able to be here today. Any chance we get to sit down and speak this way, to answer questions, and to give some good information that I think will kind of help everybody, get things in their mind as far as what it means when you have coyotes. That's what we'll discuss today. We can talk about lots of things, on the Outer Banks. But we'll talk about coyotes today. I don't know if you saw it, the first one. Yeah, the first one. I put this down because we've actually been giving some coyote management workshops statewide since 2017. So we're not just talking about coyotes on the Outer Banks, we're talking about coyotes statewide because they are not a native species to the state of North Carolina or to the southeast. So when they showed up, it's kind of, I would say, the new kid on the block. We got something new that people see. We got a new species that is over 30 or 40 years has become integrated in with the natural environment that we have in this state. We're not the only state that has received coyotes over the last 40 or 50 years. And I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of the history of coyotes in North Carolina. And I think what you're going to see, I mean, it's pretty mind-blowing, really, to see the change in the range of coyotes, bless you, the change in the range of coyotes across the southeast, particularly in all 100 counties of North Carolina. So, you know, I actually gave a talk to the Ducktown Council back on February 21st, and I think right after that we gave a talk at the OBX Education Center. You know, we've kind of gone from community to community up and down the Outer Banks, you know, having an opportunity to talk about what coyotes are, what they're not, to talk about the management of coyotes, but more in particular, the management of conflicts where we have coyotes, because that's generally what everybody is discussing right now, not just on the Outer Banks, but across the state and across the southeast. Everybody's kind of coming to grips with the fact that there are some things that we can all do together that serve to prevent conflicts. And that's always a focus, because you prevent what you can prevent. You can't prevent everything, but you certainly, I think when everybody has the knowledge, they can kind of work through issues, you know, hopefully before they arise, and then if they do arise, you know, there's ways of dealing with those things. So one thing I wanted to mention too, duck being in Dare County was a different presentation, because Currituck and Dare County under the current coyote rules are very different. Okay, so 95 counties in the state are under a set of coyote rules, basically an open coyote season. It's very open what you can do and how you can do things. There are 5 counties in the state, including Dare County, that are considered a red wolf area, that we actually have special regulations in place regarding coyotes. So when I come to the Currituck, we just have a different talk than I would if we were in Dare. So some of you may live in Dare and be here for this talk, but Dare County is a different county, as are 4 other counties: Dare, Hyde, Terrell, Washington, and Beaufort. Those are the 5 counties that have a different set of rules. So I'm not going to get into a lot of details on that, but I'm going to give you the resources here in a few minutes that I think you can, if you have any questions about those 5 counties, you'll be able to get those answers. As always, you can always ask us. If you have things come up or if you have questions, more than glad to try and help you address those questions. I've got a few of my cards that I can give to you, and you know, I deal with all the wildlife resources in these 13 counties. So if you have other things that come up, more than glad to help you get through things if you need to. So anyway, so we'll start out with, you know, kind of start at the beginning when we talk about coyotes as a non-native species in the state of North Carolina. You know, we kind of have to go back a little bit before we had coyotes to fully understand why we see coyotes now, and you know, kind of take you up to date as far as the current status of coyotes. You know, these are questions that always come up in a discussion. Where did they come from? You know, if you lived on the Outer Banks for more than 20 years, you remember a time when nobody was talking about coyotes. We've actually had coyotes documented on the Outer Banks since 2009. So, you know, basically from the top of the Outer Banks here all the way down to Hatteras, there's coyotes present. One thing that's interesting about the Outer Banks being a little narrow spit of land, you know, just because you see a coyote in one place doesn't mean you're not seeing the same one some distance away, because they certainly are relegated to the land on the Outer Banks. But I'll just say, water's no barrier. That's how they got to the Outer Banks. So they find a way, because that's what coyotes do. You know, what impact do they have? We'll get into some of that. And then what can we do about them? That's a big discussion. But I really want to address that from a practical standpoint. So we'll get into management of coyotes and management of coyote conflicts as well. Coyote description, you know, we got a coyote pale right here on the table. Miss Sharon, she wore it in, and that's
In a fine color.
it made a fine collar, a nice warm collar. But coyotes, I mean, most coyotes that you see are going to be somewhere between 25 and 40 pounds. That's probably an average coyote. We certainly have seen them bigger than that, but you know, generally what you see is something the size of a medium-sized dog. You know, we've got plenty of foxes on the Outer Banks as well. So foxes, you know, being considerably smaller than a coyote, you know, maybe quite a bit less than half of what a coyote weight might be. So sometimes you might see a coyote, sometimes you might see a fox, but if you put them beside each other, they're pretty clearly very different. Variation in colors. What you see on the table there is, I think, pretty much what you see generally when you see coloration of a pelt. That's more or less this color, you know, or this color. One thing that's interesting is when coyotes first show up in an area, you might see more black coyotes. Some of you might have seen a black coyote. I mean, I'm jet black. Just genetically, some of those genes pop up when densities are low, and over time, it kind of starts to fade out as you get more coyotes. You see fewer black ones. But yeah, I've had people call me about a black animal, and you know, wind up being a coyote. But you know, certainly can see anything in the range of colors from yellow with very little marking all the way to jet black. You know, salt and pepper is kind of how I describe it. Coyote habitat. Habitat is where wildlife gets its food, water, shelter, and spaces, everything tied together. Coyotes they're a habitat generalist. They can use almost anywhere, which makes it a pretty interesting species. Coyotes are survivors because they are generalists, habitat generalists. They can use any of these habitats, and generally they use all of these habitats. So coyotes, they use a fairly large area. They're always on the move, and they might be in an agricultural field hunting mice one day, and be in a residential area the next eating somebody's dog food. I mean, that's what coyotes can do. So none of the pictures you see here, yeah, you can see a coyote in any of those places because they're productive for coyotes. Okay. This is actually some pictures of a GPS. You can put a GPS collar on a coyote, and some studies have done that. And you can see the types of locations that you might pick up a coyote. You know, one that's passing through. I think these are from Raleigh. You know, the coyotes passing through Raleigh. If you don't get into these blocks of woods, you might not ever see them, or you might just catch a glimpse of one crossing the road. Highways and coyotes, you know, they don't go real well together. And the more coyotes we get, you know, the more likely it is we see someone run over on the highway, which I've certainly seen. I mean, this week I've seen, you know, 2 or 3 run over where I live. But anyway, they can live anywhere, you know, at that point. Coyote food, as a habitat generalist, they use lots of habitats. As an omnivore, they can eat almost anything. So, you know, a lot of times we look at coyotes as predators, meaning that they kill and eat other animals, and they do. But that's not all they do. They use whatever's available when it's available. So during the fall, you know, you get coyotes eating grapes. You know, you get into some of the forested areas around here, you get a bunch of grapevines, tropic grapes, muscadines. They're eating grapes. They're eating persimmons. In agricultural areas, I've had some issues with watermelon damage. Coyotes will eat watermelons. You know, so certainly, you know, insects as well. When you kind of start to tie it all together, coyotes can live anywhere, and they can make a living almost anywhere. You know, I guess one thing that we run into on the Outer Banks in a discussion is feral cats. You know, that's just a small mammal to a coyote. I mean, they certainly can eat cats, poultry, chickens, all the way up to a livestock. You know, coyotes are certainly known, particularly out west where they've always had coyotes. You know, coyotes are certainly known to in particular take smaller farm animals. So, we got coyotes, and they can eat almost anything, almost anywhere. Okay. Really interesting, if you look at the blue, the dark blue here, that is the range of coyotes back, basically pre-settlement over most of North America. We had coyotes, in the plains, and if you remember watching cartoons, I still watch them. I just have to say, I still watch cartoons, and I'm not ashamed. But back in the day, we saw coyotes. We always thought about the desert Southwest. Who knows the cartoon that makes you think about that? Oh, you watch it too. I grew up without coyotes in this state. For the most part, we didn't have coyotes. Nobody talked about it. But my knowledge of coyotes was a coyote chasing a roadrunner, and it's all about cacti and sand and big monument cliffs, and that was my impression of coyotes over most of my life. So that's generally where we had coyotes originally. Over time, over the 1800s, you start to see an expansion of the coyote population into basically areas that have become settled by people. That some of these areas have been made suitable for coyotes that were not suitable before. And I say that because, like we see at residential places, in towns and cities, they can provide coyotes plenty of resources, which open the door for expansion over time. And that's what we've seen. By today, we got coyotes all the way from central Alaska down all the way through the southeast. Now that's you're looking at a couple of hundred years of change, but that's the expansion that we've seen. Because as a generalist, they can use almost any piece of land. And as a species, they always are expanding where they can expand. So I've always thought this is a pretty interesting map. When we get into North Carolina, we actually had coyotes documented in this state prior to 1983. Okay, so we're going back 35 years, right off the bat. But there were coyotes documented in Gaston County, over here towards Charlotte, Swain County in the mountains, Johnston County in the edge of the coast, Wake County, all the way from 1938 all the way to 1978. There were documented coyotes that people had either shot and killed or had seen, and it was documented as an official sighting. So that it goes back quite a ways, actually. When we started to see them in North Carolina as a presence. But you can see it's very sparse, very sporadic presence. Okay. By the mid-1980s, what we were seeing was across the southeast. Historically they were here. They started pushing east. There were coyotes. Basically, by the mid-80s, there's a lead edge of coyotes, basically just west of North Carolina. So, the way I look at this is they've been coming. They've been coming for a long time. By the mid-80s, they were pretty much the population of coyotes on 3 sides of us, basically. They're showing up. And I'm going to show you some pictures in just a few minutes about the distance that coyotes can expand. We call it dispersal of young coyotes into new places. And when you start to see the distance that they can disperse, when you see this line here, all of a sudden some things I think start to make some sense about how quickly this can happen. Okay, how quickly we can receive coyotes and have an established population. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of take you over time. Between 1983 and 85, we started to get coyote sightings in the far eastern part of the state. Part of that is due to the fact that we actually had private individuals over time that brought coyotes in from other states to put into fox pens that they would use to run their dogs and chase coyotes in these pens. And it was documented some illegal release of coyotes on the private land. And what generally happened was if you put them in a pen, what happens when the fence goes down? Well, at that point, they're out of the pen. And I think that's a pretty likely way to have this change here. You know, one documentation in the West and one in the Far East. So that's, all of a sudden, here you go, by 1988, we're starting to get more counties with official sightings. By 1990, 96, by the year 2000, by 2003, and by 2005, almost all of the state, except for the Outer Banks, had documented coyotes. Now that's pretty interesting, because that's a fairly short amount of time to see all 100 counties receive a coyote population this established at this point. By 2009, we had documentation of coyotes on the Outer Banks down at Hatteras. So here we are at the top of the Outer Banks. That they've been here for quite a while. Really, over about the last 3 years, have I started to receive, quite a few calls about sightings and some problems, that do come up, period. Not all the time, but they do come up. Coyotes do some things that, certainly create a problem for some people. But that's basically the change over time. Can you roll back to the 80s? There you go. Go to the 80. There you go.
Oh, this one?
The next one. Next one. And I always thought this is kind of cool, but just kind of roll it through. You're looking at 35 years. It's kind of like a little time machine kind of deal. We just watched 35 years of an expansion of a species into the state. All 100 counties now. We certainly have coyotes. One of the things that's interesting, and what I'm going to show you, is you might ask, well, how in the world can a coyote that lives right here wind up other places? Because I only see them right here. What you may be seeing isn't just coyotes that are born and bred here. You may see coyotes that are actually from other places that are what we would call transient coyotes, meaning they never settle down, they constantly travel. Looking for a place to settle and create a territory, but they're always on the move. One thing that we see in young coyotes is when they basically leave the family group that they were born in, young coyotes take off and they walk and walk and walk until they can find a place that's unoccupied, and they create a territory there. They pair up there, and that's where they would have a territory and have basically have pups. If they can find a mate, they can have pups there. The dispersal distance is really pretty mind-blowing. What I'm going to show you is some GPS information, GPS data that came from GPS collars that were put on coyotes in Fort Bragg. So, Fort Bragg basically, go back.
Yeah.
Fort Bragg, basically in Cumberland County, right on the Hornet lines, right here. There was a study done several years ago where they GPS collar coyotes, and GPS has satellite data that's picking up signals, and you can actually get hourly points, you can get daily points, you can set up how you want to. But what you get to see is you can see, really get good insight on daily movements, weekly movements, that kind of thing. So, go to the next one. So there's Fort Bragg. This is a good example of a coyote dispersal. So you have a coyote that's collared here at Fort Bragg that winds up almost in Georgia at dispersal. This is a subadult female. Now, females typically don't disperse the distances that males can, but this is one that left North Carolina and wound up almost in Georgia over several months. This isn't years. This is a few months. Okay. Go to the next. There you go. There's another. This is the one I like. Same place, right? Same place as the subadult female. Subadult female winds up almost in Georgia, another coyote, subadult animal, wound up almost in Richmond from Fort Bragg. Well, all right, go back one. Yeah. What we see here is, I don't just look at the distance of dispersal. I always kind of have to look at the fact that when you have a coyote population, you have animals doing this, making these types of movements, not in one direction, right? And we saw basically a southwestern move. We saw a straight northern move. You can pretty much say we have long dispersal distances potentially in any direction. Now that's pretty interesting, because you remember the blue line out here back in the 80s. We were basically on the edge of an established coyote population. It starts to kind of help me get my mind around how coyotes wind up across the state in 30 years. I would just say, if you see a coyote tomorrow, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, where exactly did it come from? We've had them run over on bridges. Had them run over on the Currituck Bridge. I know one run over on the Corolla River Bridge right now. I saw one on the Alligator River. They find ways to make these trips. This coyote had to cross lots of rivers. This coyote had to cross through lots of towns, through lots of yards, and wound up just basically settling in up here, almost in Richmond. So I think that kind of helps us get our mind around coyotes. They can use anywhere, and they are very they're very capable of expanding. And so here we are. Who would think we have coyotes on Outer Banks? Well, if you kind of look at this, it's really not a surprise that we do. There's no barriers. I told somebody the other day, the only barrier that I know of is what's to the east of us. That's a pretty significant barrier. That's a pretty significant barrier. I really believe we would have, whether we had coyotes brought in by people or whatever, however it happened, I believe we would receive, we'd have a coyote population one way or the other, eventually, and we have. And that kind of sets us into, I think, where we need to be as far as understanding, why do we have them? Well, we were going to have them. One thing that's interesting about coyotes is they're actually density dependent, meaning that, all right, click on that. When we have low competition, go to the next one. Yeah, just keep on going. When we have increased competition between packs, or not packs, but family groups is what we're talking about. We have reduced litter sizes. They have fewer young. We have lower pup survival rates, and we have fewer yearlings breeding. That's when there's a lot of competition between animals. What that results is in high mortality, and when the population goes down lower, what we get is decreased competition. So with less competition, there's more resources available for the coyotes that are still here. And what we get is they respond with greater litter sizes, higher pup survival rates, and greater yearling breeding, meaning that you get younger breeding going on, which pushes the numbers up. Well, and then it kind of feeds itself again, because you get more competition at that point, and it pushes itself back down. So the reason for the dispersals that we see is that's one way of minimizing and expanding into places where there's less competition. It's pretty interesting. That drives the population. So the fewer coyotes there are, the more there will be, generally. I think that's one way of looking at it. The more there are, the fewer there will be over time. But it runs itself. Okay? All right. So that, basically we got them. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the interactions that you may have experienced some things yourselves, but things that we certainly know that as a species, coyotes are capable of doing. Go to the next Certainly coyotes can affect other species. That's one of the concerns that I hear, is that coyotes are eating all the rabbits. You know, they have been shown to be able to have a negative effect on red fox populations, because as canines, they're competitive with each other. They use the same places. But red foxes, when they use the same type of places as coyotes, they can be directly affected by the coyotes, because coyotes are bigger. So what we can see is that red fox populations basically can be pushed down when coyotes show up. And it's been pretty well documented. I think I might have seen a little bit of that myself. I don't see the red foxes I used to see. I don't hear about them on the beach as much as I used to. Still got red foxes, but certainly that's one thing that can take place. What's interesting is we also have gray foxes. That is our native fox to the state of North Carolina. And gray foxes are not impacted by coyotes as much as red foxes, because gray foxes can actually climb. The red foxes, they can't climb trees. Grays can. They can basically get away and escape an animal that's bigger than themselves. So that's our native fox. They continue on. Red foxes can be impacted. Some of the things that come up to me as far as concerns. Or basically wildlife diseases. You have people saying the coyotes get sick. Well, they can start to carry all kinds of things. Human safety. That probably should be first on the list. And then property damage. Which would include pets, would include poultry and livestock, and other things. So those are some of the things that we see often come up as concerns. What's interesting, I wanted to show this because certainly rabies, any mammal can get rabies. Some mammals are more likely to carry rabies than other mammals. A good example, this is the number of animals that were tested at the Department of Agriculture lab in North Carolina, in Raleigh, between 1990 and 2015. Basically, foxes, skunks, and raccoons wind up being the ones that if they're submitted for testing, are most likely to come back with a positive for rabies. We've had 14 coyotes in this period of time versus over 7,000 raccoons during the same period of time. So they certainly can contract rabies, but it just doesn't happen very often. As far as when causing problems, certainly cats, dogs, and bats, are one of the others. Raccoons, skunks, foxes, and bats are considered rabies vectors, meaning they can carry rabies without showing rabies. So that's kind of how that works with those species. Just seeing a coyote is not necessarily a problem. And we got them, and they're present. I always say that if you see a coyote around a residential area, that is actually the time to look around at your property and say, is there anything that I'm doing that would attract a coyote to spend time in my yard? And to let your neighbors know the same thing, that hey, I've seen a coyote cross the road in, 2 or 3 times over the last week. Just wanted to make you aware. I think that's a really good way of using this to an advantage, because typically I think we overstep what the problem actually is. When it comes down to seeing coyotes and dealing with problems, it's 2 different things. But I think it's always good to have the opportunity to have an advanced look and say, is there anything that I'm doing I can change that will reduce the chances of a problem? Okay. This is true of many wildlife species, including coyotes. Almost all the issues that I deal with, not just coyotes, but other issues as well, hinge on food. Sometimes it's pet food on the porch. It brings in raccoons or possums or foxes. That's always historically, that's been the issues that I've had calls about on the beach. you know, all of a sudden, it's not just those species, but coyotes kind of become part of that mix as well. Bird seed and garbage, you know, that becomes an issue potentially around residential areas as well. You know, we all make garbage, we all make trash. I think the key is if you start having problems with animals pulling your trash out, the thing to do is to make sure it only happens once, and then we deal with the trash in a way that it's not there at the same time. I mean, that's I deal with lots of bear issues in the 13 counties I work, and most of those hinge on garbage and trash cans, and that's always the first step. If a bear knocks the can over, make sure that the next night there's no food there. You know, that prevents a lot of issues, rather than what I see a lot of the time, which is by the time somebody calls me and says, I got a bear problem, he's been doing it for 3 or 4 weeks every night. And it just keeps going, you know, and gets to be a real issue. Go ahead. You know, they like we said, they can adapt to living around people because we use the same places. I mean, this is a terrible. Every time I see this picture, I just have to shake my head because what do you think the guy's doing? Yeah, intentionally feeding. You know, that can cause a lot of issues. Most people do not do that because they know that they shouldn't, but some people do. If you ever know about somebody who's intentionally feeding, we can have issues with behavior while changing, where they actually see people as somebody who's going to feed me. That changes everything about their behavior, because instead of wanting to stay away from people, all of a sudden they may actually approach people or seek people out to be fed. So this is a good example of that type of issue.
Is that a real picture?
That is a real picture.
Oh, wow.
Yep. I don't know where it was taken, but you know, obviously they're probably having a picnic, and I would say that he's probably done this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the coyote has probably done this before and has been rewarded to come that close to be fed. We don't want that. That changes a lot of, that creates all kinds of problems. Go ahead. So that's kind of an overview of coyotes and the history of coyotes in this state. Really interesting history, because you know, just over my lifetime, I've seen it go from nobody talks about coyotes because we don't have any, to, you know, here we are today talking about something that's not uncommon anymore. So, you know, managing coyotes and managing the population, that's very important, and that goes on statewide. Managing a population is one thing. Managing conflicts and damage, that's another thing. Okay? But they're linked, right? I mean, by managing a population, we certainly manage at a lower number annually, which at some point, you know, certainly may contribute to less conflicts at some level. But it doesn't stop all the conflicts. They're two different things. All conflicts. They're two different things. Go ahead. This is something that always comes up. You know, I've had lots of people say, well, can't we just get rid of them? And the answer is, I have to say no. Because basically in order to push the population down and maintain it at where it will decline and not stabilize or rise, you've got to take over 70% of the standing population annually. And the reason for that is partly because of this. You know, like we talked about, we have coyotes moving all the time. And when things open up where a coyote is gone now because somebody has run over with a car, or they have shot it while they were hunting, or they took it trapping, all of a sudden when space is open, we've still got coyotes that are moving around and fill those holes, more or less, I think is a good way to look at it. So, yeah, we can't eradicate them. And part of the issue also is that the harder you push down, you can see this type of response in some places. You know, I think where it goes for me is eradication is not a word that we can really discuss, because eradication means we're down to zero. That's not where we can go. But where we can go is when we acknowledge that we have to manage a population over time. I think there are tools in the toolbox that allow us to manage the population at some level, but also allow us to deal with the problems that might arise, basically case by case, individual by individual, when it comes down to problem coyotes. I mean, on the Outer Banks, I'm going to say that the number one concern I get is pet safety. You know, sometimes human safety or perceived human safety is linked into it, because what we see sometimes is that coyotes, being canines, they have a territorial aggression towards other canines. Has anybody ever seen that? Have you ever been walking your dog and had a coyote come basically out of nowhere and stand in front of you and snarl at your dog? That's a canine behavior. That's two canines that they're squaring off, because that's what dogs do. I've seen dogs do that with other dogs, haven't you? Same type of behavior by canines. But that certainly opens the door for pet safety discussions. Cats are just small mammals to coyotes. You know, basically, coyotes look at cats just like they would look at rabbits and mice. It's easy pickings if we basically make cats congregate or we make them available. You know, that's always a part of the discussion, and that's a hard part of it around residential areas. Because if we have our dogs and we have our cats and we want to let them roam or be free, or particularly at night, let them out, when we know we've got coyotes present in the area, I think there's a question mark there. There's potential for an issue. It does not happen all the time, but I think that's where we really start to work towards the preventative part of it, and to say, we know we got them, what do we need to do to minimize the issues, okay? I mean, food is always a part of the issue. Pet food, table scraps. I see people throw stuff out in the edge of the woods, and I always say, if you feed one thing, you feed everything. Some people are like, I don't mind feeding possums. The problem is, if you feed possums, you're feeding other things as well. And you may be feeding coyotes, or creating a situation where they start to hang around because they try to use the resource up. If the food's there, they'll keep checking it. As long as it's there, they'll use it. When it's gone, they leave it. That's generally what you see. We have, I call it a toolbox. There are certain things that we can use to deal with certain issues as preventative measures, or issues that are actually ongoing. Non-lethal tools. I mean, I think this is a great example of a non-lethal way of dealing with issues. So I think when we all get together and we start to talk about what's going on, I think it sets things in place that we can all kind of look around and say, is there anything I can do? Because I think when we all come together and work together, we're certainly more effective, at preventing issues. Non-lethal tools include education. Lethal tools include hunting and trapping and depredation permits. So I'm going to kind of hit those the best I can. But the whole key is that we use the tools in the toolbox as they need to be used. There's some things available, but we have to determine which is the most appropriate tool for the given problem. Okay. We'll go back. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Yeah, I'm going to take just a minute. I want to show you our website is a great education tool. Dare County, I've given this talk a couple of times, and they actually put the talk on the Dare County website, so that whenever people come up and say, I don't know why we have coyotes, there's a resource there that people can actually kind of get get some pretty focused information on that website. Our website is a great tool for understanding issues and understanding what the tools are and how to make contact with somebody if you need some help. You know, there's ways of getting some help. Okay. Go ahead one more. I mean, these are some of the things that I think when we all look around, if we got anything that's attracting wildlife to our yard, that would be a first step. Not letting dogs run free, particularly small dogs, because coyotes they can see small dogs as food. Small dogs, and then have aggressive behaviors towards larger dogs. Cats indoors, that's just a great step when you know you got coyotes. It's hard to do sometimes. Then basically modifying habitat. If you got wood piles and things in your yard that hold mice, or you got places you're just like, oh, the rabbits love this little pile of brush over here. Anything that modifies the habitat to be unsuitable, that helps. I mean, basically, where you got manicured lawns, you don't have some issues, but you can't keep things from walking through. You know, that becomes part of the issue. Fencing can help with some of that as well. Go ahead. Managing the population. I mean, on an annual basis, we have hunting and trapping. Some people don't like hunting, some people don't like trapping, but those are the tools to manage your population on an annual basis. The goal is not to get all the coyotes. The goal is to manage the numbers on an annual basis. Sometimes hunting and trapping can be used to remove individual problem coyotes. Like right now, trapping season is in this part of the coast, and we actually maintain a list of licensed trappers who, if you had a piece of property and you wanted to talk to somebody about possibly coming and trapping on your property recreationally, that's a good avenue in some places to be able to take some individual coyotes that might be causing you problems at any particular time. That's just one tool that's available. All right. Coyote hunting, basically it's wide open in 95 counties with special regulations in Dare and 4 other counties. I'm not going to get into all that right now, but that information I'll hit in just a few minutes. All right, go ahead. This is really interesting. This is 2005 all the way to 2014. The hunter harvest of coyotes, that's the green line, that's statewide harvest. That's the number of coyotes. We determine this by survey. We don't know exactly how many coyotes are taken, but through survey we can know how many coyotes people have taken and kind of spread it out over the state. You definitely can see, I think the increase in the population is probably shown here. There's more coyotes available. The orange line is actually the trapper harvest. It's about 1/10 of what the hunting harvest is. So fewer coyotes taken by trapping, but I want to show you the next one. But the number of the green line here is actually the harvest per trapper. So the number of coyotes taken per trapper is a lot higher than the number of coyotes taken per hunter. So what I see is that the hunting and trapping certainly is a good management tool. Trappers take fewer coyotes, but each trapper takes more. So where you can trap, it's a good tool. Where you can hunt, that would also be a tool for managing the population. Again, not to manage problems, but to manage the population at some level. Okay. We talk about hunting and trapping as tools. The Outer Banks, because of the land and because of the dense human development here, hunting and trapping may be very limited in most places. These are all parcels. It's the most dense human population in the 13 county district that I work, especially in July. Right? In July, wow, it really swells. But part of the limitation that we run into is basically in order to allow somebody to trap during the trapping season, a licensed trapper has to have written permission for your property if you want somebody to trap. So you're talking about very small parcels of land. When you see coyotes use a really large area. So it is a tool, but it may be very limited. Not just because of parcel size, but because of the situation with the number of people that we have living so close in a lot of these places. It may not be accepted as a tool in certain places. And I think, you know, whether it's feasible or not, that comes down to communities and it comes down to individual property owners that may or may not desire to look into it as a possible tool. So basically, this part of the state, December 1st, licensed trappers can trap recreationally. In these counties, it's a tool in the toolbox. Good way of kind of having that discussion with trappers. Go ahead. Basically, an annual trapping license is needed. You got to have written permission from a landowner in order to trap on their property. You can't give somebody permission to trap on somebody else's property. That's how that's set up. So written permission, and certainly there may be local ordinances that you have to check into before it can be allowed. But generally in those counties, it's one option. Go ahead, keep on rolling. Go ahead. In Dare County, Currituck, and some other counties, basically people trapping for coyotes cannot keep foxes. There's no fox trapping season in these counties. That's basically done by local law, not by the Wildlife Commission, but by local law. And some counties don't allow it. So in some ways, that may limit the number of people who are willing to come trap. If they wanted to trap coyotes and foxes, they can't keep foxes, but they can trap coyotes. So that's just a part of the law here that plays into whether people would or wouldn't.
What do they do with them after they trap them?
Basically, there's a fur market that people still sell to. The fur market has been depressed for a long, long time, but some people just enjoy trapping, recreationally. Some coyotes are actually sold alive to fox pens. That's legal in this state as well. And that's where some of the incentive that people come trap, to be able to do that. But, basically it's all recreational trapping. There's always been a fur market. This has driven trapping. But, trapping and fur market now don't play very well together. Go ahead. Again, one issue that we run into, if somebody was going to come trap, they have to keep in mind that if you're trapping around with a lot of people, you got to be very, very careful because you may catch more than just what you're trying to trap, right? I mean, so whether it's feasible or not, I don't think it goes situation to situation. People, landowners and communities have to decide how they would use that tool. Go ahead. Depredation permits, that is a tool in the toolbox for dealing with individual problem animals that are either destroying property or have destroyed property, or that are basically killing livestock or poultry. So if you have property damage or you have an aggressive coyote, that's basically hanging around your yard, that kind of thing, depredation permits can allow a second party to trap on your behalf. And that's year-round. That's not just during the trapping season. That's while there is a problem on your property. So that's another tool. If you've actually got a problem going on and you say, I don't know what to do, I think this animal needs to be removed, then we would have the discussion about whether a permit could be issued to help you with that problem. But that's another tool in the toolbox. Go ahead. Wildlife damage control agents, which we've got a list that we maintain on our website, they can actually issue permits to the landowner, property owner, with themselves as a second party to do the trapping on your behalf. Damage control agents can actually charge for their services. Okay, so they can't charge for the permit, but they can charge for any work that they do on your behalf. They're basically kind of like a painter. You know, they provide a service and you determine, you know, they determine prices and that kind of thing. But that's one option if you can't do things yourself. We maintain a list. All right, go ahead. We cannot relocate coyotes or raccoons or foxes. We can't live trap and then take somewhere else and dump them out. Partly because of disease issues, and partly because if a problem begins on one piece of property, it really doesn't do any good to take that animal and put him on some unsuspecting person. You know, the problem begins and it turns into something the animal has to be trapped. We certainly don't put them on somebody else because the problem originated where you're dealing with the animal at. So that's a part of it, you know, plus disease issues. We don't relocate those animals. Okay. All right, go ahead. That's about depredation permits. Damage control agents can issue, and I can issue as well. Our enforcement officers, our game wardens, could also be a contact as far as looking at depredation permits. In the 5-county area, only the Wildlife Commission can issue depredation permits for coyotes in 5 counties, including Dare County. So it's a little different in those 5 counties as far as permits. Yeah, basically, in summary, coyotes are here to stay. They're not going away. Just seeing a coyote is not a problem. We apply annual management as we can, using the tools that we have. I think it's a good idea to share awareness. I mean, I think we're doing that today. If you have an issue, you can always let me know. You can always let your neighbors know, so that everybody kind of come together and figure out what the origin of the problem is and what the solutions might be. You know, I have to say, when we assess our property, we always have to be mindful of our pets. Yeah, and sometimes that's a hard thing to deal with, because sometimes we have the habit of letting things run free in our yard, or letting them out for days on end, and then calling them back in and feed them and let them go again. That's something to consider as far as trying to deal with that part of it. Conflict prevention. Yeah, that's the first step. That starts with education. We can work together and be creative in that. But problems, when they do arise, if you're dealing with a problem, there's some solutions there for that individual issue on your property. You can call me anytime. I've got my cards and my information on our website as well. That if you have things come up and you're just like, I don't know what to do about this, more than glad to come take a look at it with you. Take a look at the situation, and we can figure out which solutions would be a part of the solution on your property. Okay?
Sir?
Yes?
How do they kill them? Can they just shoot them? Or if a trapper wants to go out
Yes.
and shoot coyotes, he can shoot them and he can leave the bodies there, he has to take the bodies away? Or do they trap them in traps? And then you hear a lot of talk around here that certain communities, maybe Chris, even our community, that's hiring trappers. And they're going to come onto the property and take so many coyotes per year off the property. Is that all included in trapping? And do people then, are they told, we hired a trapper, and you hear shooting like we hear them shooting on the ducks and the sounds?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I think that the tools that are available, everybody has to decide how they can use them most effectively. As far as what happens on your property, that would be up to you. But certainly within communities, there's county property or town property that the town was having discussions about what can we do, that we can have discussions about what would apply on that property. But it doesn't apply on everybody's property. I think that's a part of what you were asking. The tools, how they are applied, I think there's some flexibility there. But, you know, basically the rules and the regulations kind of keep it where it needs to be in order to be effective. Yes?
I think it's important to point out, although we may have started as a shooting club, there's no shooting in the club.
That's nice to know.
Okay?
Right. Right, and this piece of property has its own ordinances and rules and regulations that would determine what's available. So, and everywhere it's kind of like that. I think that's the benefit of these discussions, is that if there are enough issues and people want to have the discussion, I think when everybody starts to talk about how it would work, that comes down to what will be allowable and what will be feasible and what will be safe, you know, depending on where you are. Yes?
What months are the trapping season or the hunting season?
The hunting in this county and 94 other counties is basically, it's a year-round season for hunting. And there are rules and regulations in place and how you can do that. Trapping season in this part of the state generally comes in December 1st and goes out at the end of February. So that's when they can be trapped by licensed trappers. Depredation permits, which are used basically to deal with individual animals that are causing specific problems on specific properties. Depredation permits could be issued any time that is warranted.
Now, is the trapping normally done nocturnally, since they're a nocturnal animal? And the same thing with any hunting?
Right. Basically trapping, when regulated trapping would have licensed trappers who can use the traps that the law allows. You know, certain things you can't do, but the law sets in place how you can do it. And traps are generally set, and they're left but checked every day. They have to be checked every 24 hours, not wondering if you've caught an animal, but actually visiting each trap and taking any animal that's been trapped out of the trap. So it's every day.
Generally, I have raccoons and we use traps. There's somebody that came in and got them. But with the coyotes, generally the trapping would be done at, I would assume used at night when they're out roaming rather than, you know, they tend to roam more at night, correct?
Right, they're basically right when it starts to get dark, you know, they'll move into the night, but early in the morning and late in the evening is the key times. But you can see one any time, really, but nighttime certainly, especially around people, because when everything gets quiet, you know, they don't want to be around anybody. I mean, because they're wild. But you know, that's generally when everything gets quiet, that's when a lot of things start to walk around.
Is that why we're seeing more of them this time of year? Because there are not as many people here?
Could be. You know, I mean, certainly we've got we're getting ready to go into their breeding time. So they start to get active and start to move around more into January. And that's generally what there's little peaks of movement, you know, throughout the year. But, yeah, you can see one almost any time. But, you know, when traps are set by licensed trapper, I mean, they set them and they leave them as long as the trapping season's in, or they pull them up every week and put them back again. Everybody kind of decides how they would do that. But they have to be checked daily. And that's a serious rule.
Trappers do that as they did with my raccoon. They came back every day and checked.
Right, yeah, you have to. Yes, sir.
Two questions. We had heard that Duck had hired a trapper at some point. Do you know how many coyotes he took?
I'm not aware of what Duck has done. You know, I've given a talking duck, but every community kind of figures out how they would want to do it. You know, I don't know of anybody being hired or anything. Yeah, I don't know.
Second question was, the traps that they're using, are they instant lethal traps?
They're not.
Soft traps.
They're not. They're a lot of soft traps, foothold traps that they can use traps that, you know, catch the toe and hold them in the trap.
Okay.
Yeah, you can put your hand in the trap. It'll hold you in the trap, but it doesn't hurt your fingers. When some people use those. But we basically lay out in the rules and regulations what can be used, because they're actually best management practices for trapping all species that can be trapped, all fur bearer species, and that information is always available to trappers to basically do what is in the best interest of the animal, as well as the best interest of trappers, in trapping. Because there's certain ways that you can do it that's very effective, but it is also, probably works better in the big picture than some other things that might be unlawful. Best management practices, you hear about those in lots of things. Basically, it uses research to lay out the best way of doing something. And trapping has best management practices as well. It's actually on our website. So trappers they generally try to do the best that they can, to be effective and to be safe that way. Yep. Okay.
Two unrelated. Do coyotes fish?
They will eat fish.
You said they're not hindered traveling by water, so they can swim, obviously.
Yes, sir.
Are they known to go into water after fish?
I don't know about them, trying to catch fish,
Okay.
but I would not surprise.
Okay.
It would surprise me. They carry them. If they find dead things, they eat dead things too. So.
The second question is, do they operate in packs? You seem to indicate individuals, but...
Right. What we see, when you talk about wolves, like gray wolves or timber wolves, that's a pack animal. You get multiple family groups and levels, like hierarchy levels. What we see with coyotes is generally family groups. You have, a male and a female that carry a territory, that defend a territory, and they have the pups within the territory. And then the pups, when they get, they're basically raised up till they can leave the den, and then they stay with the pair until you get dispersal. So what you might see is a pair, and then some subadults, and then juveniles. So you get multiple animals, but it's not so much a pack as it is. It's a family group of multiple animals.
So have you seen groups like that attack small dogs at the same time?
I have not.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that they couldn't, but I'll tell you this is really interesting. A lot of the calls that I get regarding like aggressive animals or coyotes that are it's kind of like they don't want to listen to what's going on. They're hard-headed, some of them. It's like they're not getting it. Some of those we actually see in the late summer, they're juvenile animals. They're young, and they're trying to figure out how to do all these things. And when we get into the early fall, some of those animals are moving around. They might leave the family group, and they're on their own, and they get into mischief. There's a lot of critters that are like that. That it's the yearlings and the subadults, the young animals, that they're trying to make their way in a hard world. It's a hard world. But when they're trying to make their way as an individual, especially when they're dispersed, they're just doing the best they can. And some of them can be fairly bold because they don't get it. They haven't learned yet how this all works. And a lot of times by late summer, that's when I start to get some calls that I suspect may be younger animals. Because the other thing to keep in mind is by late summer, you have the highest number of coyotes locally that you will have. All the young have come out of the dens by summer, and they're starting to be mobile, and they're moving around, and they're hunting, and they're doing all these things, and they haven't dispersed yet, and they're all kind of together at that point. That's when I get more calls. It's probably July, August time frame.
Do they mate only once a year?
Just once.
And how long is gestation?
About 66 days, same as a dog, same as a domestic dog.
Do they live in caves?
When they den up, like to have pups, they'll dig a den. You dig a hole up in it, maybe in a dune. I see fox dens in the dune line sometimes. If a tree blows down, they might get under the root ball. Sometimes I've seen them den underneath sheds, like in somebody's yard. And you can't blame them. It's great. It's a great place to make a den. But that's a really good example of something we can prevent. Because if you got a space under your shed in your yard, that's a really good place to fence so that things can't just go freely up underneath there. I mean, that's a good example of something that's easy to prevent. But yeah, they generally are in something or under something, particularly when they're denning. Yeah, after that, they're kind of on the move, but they're within the area that is their territory. Just like a dog, they're very territorial.
So what I'm hearing is, and I've heard this also from some wildlife experts in the area, out in our backyards, we have probably a family that has established that area as its territory. The young ones are dispersing now and moving on because this territory can only carry so many critters, right? So what's the point of trapping them? Is it another family just going to move in?
Well, I've had to address that in my mind too, because you got coyotes around, and when you take out some individuals, you do get other ones moving in potentially. How long it takes, I don't know. Right? I mean, that's one thing, is you don't know how long it takes for another one moves in. The other part of it is, if you're having coyote issues by removing individuals, maybe some of your issues have been relegated to something that you can tolerate, by the removal of some coyotes. I guess the alternative to that is don't ever do anything. And it stabilizes at some level.
But they have it stabilizes at some level.
At some level, but we can't measure that, but we would assume that would occur. But that doesn't solve the problem of the complaints that I get where people say there's coyotes everywhere. To some people, one's too many.
But we're going to have
This is a really good discussion, because this is part of having a coyote population. We prevent what we can prevent.
And I get it with one that's become a problem.
Right.
Right. Like we do deal with bears that become a problem. But I don't know. I mean, we may find out that the family that lives in the backyard right now is a better family than the one that's
I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right. So sometimes things might not be any better, they might be worse later. It's part of where we live. We got them, but if you're not feeding them, or they stay away from people, well, I would say that they're not causing any issues for you. That's not a bad one to have around. It's hard. Yeah.
I was really surprised to hear about bird seed.
Yes.
Wow.
I have seen a handful of bird food on the ground make a 500-pound bear come every single night for weeks and weeks and weeks. Now, a handful of bird food is not many calories for a 500-pound bear, but it's enough. Because I'll tell you why. I mean, this is really what it comes down to, because it's free, and they expend no energy to get it. It's all about free food, and when we make it difficult, or we take it away totally, I think that's the value, that's the preventive value, is that nothing wants to work for it, but if it's open and available and free, they expend no energy getting it. And they're all about conserving energy. That's what they're all wildlife has to budget its energy. And if they find something easy and free, it's worth tolerating people for. It's really kind of cool if you think about it, because I'm like the same way. I'm like the same way.
It's how we got Chris down here.
If the food's on the table, I'll sit there and I'll eat it till I'm almost sick. But once it's put up, am I going to go get it out and get all the dishes out? Probably not. I'm going to wait for somebody else. I think that's at another level. We do some of the same things, but they live in a whole world. mean, the food that they've got to get is very expensive for them to achieve. And anything free takes priority from them. And that's where food becomes a problem. Because where's the food? It's around houses. You know. Yes, ma'am.
I have some practical questions, I guess you could say. We've been given some suggestions with our pets. And I
Yes.
have a small Cavalier, so she obviously is going to be very attractive for people besides me. So, we have been given, I've been told to walk her within the fenced-in yard, which is small, it's just a pool area and everything else, and not to let her run, which is fine, but she likes running, I like letting her out.
Yes.
And we're negating that, but then also, we've been told there are things that we can carry on us when walking. How do you have the horns first? But then we have whistles
Yes.
now.
We
I think
suggested both.
somebody provided some things up here that,
Yes.
Yeah, can you tell us about those, when to use them, how to use them, what it protects? Like if we have a whistle,
right,
how do we use it?
right.
I mean, I keep mine in the jacket pocket when I go out at night with her in case one happens to jump over the fence. You
Yeah.
know, but what do I do?
Yeah, I think one key is you only use it when you need to use it, because wildlife, I mean, including everything, including coyotes, can really become habituated to certain things. If they're already living around people, they're very comfortable. You know, they're you know, if you walk towards them, they know it, they're going to leave. But they're used to hearing horns blow and people, you know, yelling because they hit the ball in the lake or what. You know, they're used to being around. But they gauge it as far as what's worth it. I think where a whistle or an air horn like this, kind of where I think these come in, would be if you're out. I think if you have these available and you're out and you get this situation where a coyote all of a sudden shows up and he's not intent on your pet, but he just shows up, that's a really good time to use it.
Okay.
Because he don't have anything in mind, he's just there. I think you can run him off because he has no intentions.
What do we do if they're intent upon our pet?
Well, I don't think it's ever a bad idea to carry a stick. I mean, I think that's always a good idea.
What about those mace sprays that they use when people hunt with the
Oh, like pepper spray?
Yeah,
I don't know about the pepper spray and coyotes,
yeah.
but what I have seen is if somebody's walking their dog, and I've had this happen, where somebody's walking their dog, like a bigger dog, like a collie or a German shepherd, and coyote, they get near a coyote den that they don't know is there. Right? So the coyote is aggressive towards the dog because it's another canine in their territory. I think what you'll see is the dog becomes very intent on the coyote, and the coyote, because it's a species thing, they become very intent on each other, they're communicating with each other. It is hard to snap them out of that. I mean, I've tried to do dog on dog stuff. Have you ever tried to break up a dog fight? I mean, that's two domestic dogs. You know, this is a little different than that. But anything that you do to announce your presence, hopefully would snap that thing apart. You know, snap what they're doing together, break it apart before it escalates. You know, last thing you would want to do is turn your dog loose on him. You know, because they get in a fight, the dog's bigger, maybe the dog wins, but yeah, then you need to go to the vet, check on your rabies.
These dogs are going to have no chance. That you're talking about if you carry a stick.
Right.
I had a neighbor that would walk my dog and carry it off. You know, which,
Be careful for the snakes.
you know, but where do you hit? You know, is there a particular spot? You know, is there?
Hit them in the head.
Most of the time, if you're aggressive toward them, they go. I've also used, because I'm on the main, so I've had a bear problem. You haven't lived, you've seen a bear rip a speed tube of PVC pipe and do it like a bag of cheese or something. So we hot wired her because we didn't want anything to happen to her. It's a female bear. Hot wire, you can't hot wire the club, I know that. But also, I've done, even like a little time, I was telling Chris, take a tiny Pringles can, anything. Put 50 pennies in it, get a metal can, put pennies in it, the noise it makes is massive.
If we used one of those walking outside at night or at dusk or when it's dark and just shook it
Yeah,
when we went out.
well, no, you don't want to teach them that this noise that's happening with you all the time, that's a normal thing to them. So it's keeping it, it's that shock
For the
thing.
emergency.
Also, it's like I told Chris, you can hurl that thing,
That's exactly right.
throw it.
People use it to train dogs.
Yeah, you have, but in the noise for a a coyote, they're not around money too much, so it's a good sound that, and it's sharp, and it's,
Is it better than the whistle?
I don't know that it's better, but you can't throw a whistle. No, I mean seriously, because it's got that weight of money,
I
and
have
you
one
can
made.
chuck that baby. You can't. So something that startles us, we found, like
Yeah.
you say,
Yeah.
this one crosses all the time. She's gotten used to my dog barking at her. My dog's not as scared of the coyote and the turkey, but wants to try to fight with the bear. So,
I think what you're saying is the can is if you find yourself getting into trouble.
anything, you have
Yes,
it,
that you
and
have
it's
something
a really
that-
sharp, jangly
Yes.
sound, and it is, and you step toward them and shake, and it's pretty loud. And
But
then,
isn't the
like,
noise,
Yeah.
Chris or Sharon, isn't that to associate when they see people that people are scary and we want to
Yes.
reinforce that?
Yes.
So that's the point of the
I can hurt
noise and
And they're not so
Yes.
much that, it's like Chris was talking about.
they're getting comfortable.
All that energy,
Yes.
fear, and that's why a lot of times they're like nip, or stalk, but they don't fight because, you hurt me, I'll die too, because I can't hump, or.
Did you make noise yourself, Chris?
What is
Like,
that?
I feel like if you were like, ah, like,
Oh, yeah.
Mine, you can clap your hands at it and just, hey, and it'll.
I mean, and again, I think that's, anything that you have, like an air horn or a whistle or a can or a stick, anything that would remind them that there's a person involved here, because coyotes and dogs have relationships. Coyotes and people have relationships too, and coyotes always, they come out on the losing end and they know it. It's, you want to be big and you want to let him know that you're there, because this isn't about you, this is about the dog and what the two canines are doing. I think anything that you do to remind and to break that, I don't know it's not a relationship, but basically the tension, to basically shatter that, so that the coyote all of a sudden realizes that he might be in danger by a person, not the dog. Because he may be getting ready to fight the dog, or the dog might fight him. I think those are good. I would never turn my back on one.
I was just gonna say.
Right.
Again, it's not so much aggression towards the people as it is, you don't want, your coyotes, they are predators, and you would not want to turn around and run from one because it's snarling at your dog. And I think that's always a consideration. You just be big and you be loud and you do something that tries to shatter the situation so that he goes on. To control your dog, you can't control him if you're not on a leash. And I've had that be a problem, where somebody's walking with a dog and the dog's everywhere, and all of a sudden the dog runs up with a coyote and they get into it. You don't want that. You can at least control it with a leash. I would not. Everybody loves their dogs, but I think you have to. The best you can do is to control your dog and be able to control your dog, because I would never recommend jumping into the middle of it and trying to pull them apart. I've seen that with two dogs fighting, and you don't want to be in that. It's very dangerous.
On that same note, I'm sorry, before we leave that topic, walking dogs, would you recommend a regular leash or a retractable?
I don't know. I kind of like the regular leash
Yes.
as a
More
good way
control.
of maintaining control. They're probably stouter. I mean, if you have to pull one away,
Okay.
then you'll break it all up.
I've seen some with retractables, and sometimes it's too difficult to get
Yeah.
the button and everything, and they're going this way, and you can't get them back, so I just wanted to.
I was out turning my dog one night and coyote was right there. It wasn't night, it was actually daytime. And the coyote was about 20 feet away, came walking around the corner, and we came this way.
Yes.
And they looked at each other, and I just went,
That's great.
he didn't run, or he or she, whatever it was, didn't run, but just turned and went back into the woods.
Yeah.
That's what happened. The
See,
other
they're
thing-
coyotes are territorial at each other as well, because defending the territory, they don't want another canine in it.
Right, exactly.
And in the spring or early summer, when they're denning, if you don't know there's a coyote den, and you get one coming out from the woods, and they go back in the woods, and they come back out snarling, well, there's probably a den there. I would have to say that is a great time to avoid that place for some period of time, and to let other, not just you, but to let other people know.
Don't go in there.
Right, the Park Service at the memorial, the Wright Brothers Memorial, they had an issue a couple of summers ago, same type deal. It was always in the same spot, and it was always involving dogs on leashes. And they actually took the step to post a sign and to make everybody aware. So nobody walked into it without knowing. And that's what else can you do? Yeah, I mean, at that point, you know, things kind of simmer down, and whatever came with the den, I don't know, never saw the den. You know, but that's a good example. If you have a situation that comes up, then you're just like, you know what, this is really kind of going downhill. You know, the behavior of an individual coyote, or it's aggressive towards people, or you get a coyote that's basically got a behavior that you're just like, this coyote's not acting right. Oh, you can always let me know, and let somebody know, and we can take a look at that, because every situation is a little different. But anyway, just this is all my information. I've got some cards that I'll be glad to give whoever wants one. And if you get, you know, I deal with a lot more than coyotes. Coyotes this is just a little piece of the wildlife issues that come up. But we always try to work through them, you know, because there's ways of dealing with those problems. I just real quickly.
You want to get a website?
Yeah, if you can. If you got just a second, I just wanted to show you our Wildlife Commission website. How many people have been on the wildlife site? It has really improved over the last 3 or 4 years. Sometimes they'll change it around a little bit, and it'll be difficult to find what you were finding. Okay, that's just how it is. You know, that's making it better, right? It's progress. But this ncwildlife.org is a great resource to let communities know and to let neighbors go, let homeowners associations. Great place to send people. Great place to send visitors when they come here to vacation. If they have problems that come up, they're you know, realty companies and different groups that have to deal with those phone calls. This is a great place to let people understand some things. Let me see. Let me just. Yeah. Excuse me. I just wanted to show you real quick. If you go to ncwildlife.org, that's the home page. If you go down to the bottom, you see right there it says have a wildlife problem. It's on at your service list. If you have a problem, find assistance with wildlife problems, that's nuisance and damage situations. Tips with coexisting, wildlife damage control. There's a contact a wildlife damage control agent. That's a list, pull down list by county. I'll show you real quick. I'll just show you, there's Camden. Every county pulls down a list of people who you could contact in order to get assistance.
That's who I use.
It does good work.
So that's Camden. And
I think it opened up a new page if you go back to the one.
oh, right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody ever find any orphaned or injured wildlife? Oh yeah, we're on the beach. We find all kinds of stuff. There's actually a list of wildlife rehabbers on this page that if you find things that you want to ask somebody about who are licensed to rehab orphan and injured wildlife, that's a good place to go. I'll show you one other thing real quick. At the top of the page, this is back on the home page. If you go to conserving and species, you can find out about all of our native species. But under mammals, oh, there he is. Okay, there's actually some printed out up here, the coexisting publication. But look at this. This. If you have any questions about the species or about issues that come up, under the coyote section, you can get the regulations. There's regulations for hunting, trapping in the 5-county area. Have a problem? Lots of information right there, and some of it actually addresses specifically what we've talked about today. Some of the questions today, I think, are here as something to be reminded of, or something to remind other people of. As we go. Let's see, management has actually got the best management practices for trapping. Coexisting with coyotes, we've got some up here that Sharon printed out. Some of your cards too. Some cards. And there's actually a coyote management plan for the state.
And I have it at the center if you want to come read it. It's 120 pages, but come on in, we'll sit down and go through it together.
It's an excellent resource to see the overview of what the Wildlife Commission is trying to achieve over time. Because we got coyotes now. That's a good resource as well. And then it gets down into some other more detailed type of information. But there's your classic coyote. But I wanted to end with. There is all kinds of ways of preventing and dealing with issues, and I think we have to be creative, right? We have to be creative and work together, and I think this is a good example of a creative approach. That I don't know how effective it is, but it may be anything that makes you feel better. Might be something. This is an example of one approach, right? But I thought this was what it told me is that I don't know if it works or not. I don't know, but other people have issues other places, and people are always looking towards. How do we deal with these issues before they arise, and how do we deal with them once they do begin? So I appreciate the chance to be here today, and I've enjoyed getting to talk about coyotes. I hope that some of the information, particularly the website, will be a resource for you to talk to your neighbors about. And if you ever have something come up on your property that you just go, I don't know what to do. I got my cards up here. And we have actually got a 1-800 number that is a wildlife hotline that will give you advice as well if you got some things you want to discuss. So you can call me anytime. All right? Thank you.